I used the Strathmore Mixed Media Sketchbook for this Inktober. I started off using the whole half page for day one, and then for the remaining days I moved to a square format. For ring, I jumped immediately to Saturn's rings. I had no clue that there were so many rings, and I like my Phoebe moon, and it's really fitting that she goes in the opposite direction from the other moons. I also got to sneak in a smelly cat reference. On Mindless, I thought about the Scarecrow from The Wizard of Oz and his journey to get a brain. Found a nice overview of Ray Bolger, the actor that played the Scarecrow. Crazy that he got no royalties. The Amazing Feather Heist story was the one I used for bait. I can't believe that somebody stole so many rare birds from the London Natural History Museum to make really expensive fishing lures. It's also crazy how many feathers are used for just a single lure. I'm a fan of frozen meals or TV dinners. It was great to hear about how they came about as a way to serve pre-cooked meals on airplanes, and it was also neat that a 22-year-old woman came up with the methods for reheating frozen foods. I also love Lincoln Logs and had no clue of their connection to the architect Frank Lloyd Wright. It's interesting that it's unclear whether the name came from President Lincoln, which was also Frank Lloyd Wright's original middle name, or if it was a play on the word linking. I used a reference of a husky from the San Francisco Shelter's Instagram account for this one. It's interesting that the English name, husky, came from a mispronunciation of the word Eskimo. For Enchanted, I jumped to one of my favorite Disney World attractions, the Enchanted Tiki Room. I can't believe that there are 225 choreographed animatronic performers and that it originally cost today's equivalent of $6.29 to see the show. Although I tried to play around with the logos and images of food and drinks that impact bone health, bone density is no joke. It's a good reminder that I need to cut back on my coffee and sparkling water consumption. Swing was a tough one, and when I found this interesting podcast, the thought of David and Venus de Milo came to mind as the images to show how our bodies swing as we move. Although they are a bit more modest than their real counterparts, I like how they turned out. Hawaiian shirts were a natural choice for pattern. I love that Casual Fridays actually started in the 60s as Aloha Fridays. I went with Jon Snow instead of the weather phenomenon for this one. I've always been interested in epidemiology, and this one resonates even more now. This dragon is another one of my favorites. I also love the concept of the Chinese zodiac. It was interesting to see how your zodiac sign could have a self-fulfilling prophecy impact for those in China. I was amazed by the Iceland volcano eruption in 2010 that had so much ash that it grounded planes in Europe. Instead of me trying to say the name of the volcano, I'm going to defer to the experts and leave a link to the video of those experts pronouncing it in the description. Kudzu is the bane of many Southerners' existences. It's surprising to see that farmers were paid to cultivate this in the Dust Bowl. It grows so quickly and is so very heavy. It's such an invasive species. I actually had the chance to end up on a work trip in Terrytown and got to see this city. I like the small headless horseman on this one in the top right corner. I think this orchid turned out nicely. It's crazy that they can be as small as an ant or as heavy as a rhinoceros. It's pretty sad that over half of orchids are endangered, and they're definitely an early indicator of issues with climate change. For ornament, I was glad that I had the chance to draw the garden gnome. It's a very strange backstory, and I'm not sure that I'd want to have an actual hermit living in my yard. I searched all over for a podcast on the island of the misfit toys from Rudolph, but came up empty. Luckily, I landed on Goonies, which is one of my all-time favorite movies. It's funny that it came in second to Rambo 2 on its opening weekend. They make quite the cinematic couple. I used Slingshot for this one, and it's a little weird that the company Whammo had a line of fun weaponry before deciding to focus in on kids' toys. I also snuck in the hula hoop trivia since it came from an Australian gym class. For tread, I wanted to do something on tires, and when I saw the history of the Michelin stars ratings for restaurants and the slightly terrifying original Michelin man, Monsieur Babindum, I knew that this was the right choice. I wanted to do something besides the classic treasure chest for this one, and when a podcast search brought up meteorite hunters, I knew that was perfect. I can't believe that one meteorite sold for $700,000. The concept of a ghost kitchen is one that I honestly have some concerns and reservations about, so I tried to lighten my mood by adding in Chef Slimer. This was an enthralling podcast. Meteorites made another appearance, this time as the blade for a dagger in King Tut's tomb. Dizzy Gillespie was my choice for this prompt. It was great to hear how he toured during the Cold War in countries that had negative feelings towards America to try to spread some goodwill. The Bent Trumpet happened when somebody fell on his trumpet stand and he decided he liked the way it sounded. For Tasty, I used a podcast about weird presidential food. Ortolan was something that I'd seen in the TV shows Succession and Billions, and it's definitely a weird thing to eat and a very weird way to eat it. Switching from gross food to actually good food, dark chocolate was my next pick. Seeing how the location of where a cacao is grown impacts its flavor was a revelation to me with this one. Coats was a tough one to decide on, but it is entirely stereotypical of cats and their stubbornness that their coats took much longer to change than horses and dogs. Sally Ride is a true hero, and this was a great interview. It's surprising that her high school didn't have math past the 11th grade or offer physics or chemistry. I can never keep sprains and strains correct in my head. I slipped in the reference to Dear Evan Hansen since we had just seen the musical when it toured locally. Brains On is always a fun listen for kids and adults. The hand washing tips and the myth busting on vitamin C were enlightening. Ripe seemed to call the name of the durian fruit. It may be a perfectly gross, yet maybe delicious way to end Inktober. The shape of this fruit, as well as the dead person smell, are fascinating. Thanks for watching, and if you're interested in any of the podcasts, let me know in the comments and I will add a link.